my screen.
Okay.
Sorry, there is a technical problem. If you prefer, we can involve before Sabrina Sacco and then the presentation with Ludovica La Rocca, because I don't know if you listen to me, but there is some technical problem.
Okay. We can pass to Sabrina Sacco and
yes, thank
Maria.
you. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and now I'm sharing my screen.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Yes, you can start it, please.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning, and thank you for the invitation. The research called Decision-Making Process for Circular Development of City Port Ecosystem, the East Naples case study, was carried out during the second level master in Sustainable Planning and Design of Port Areas of the Department of Architecture of the University of Federico II Naples. And this research is focused on the definition of a decision-making process dealing with a circular city port development. Our research, starting from the definition of the theoretical framework, details the concept that have moved the research up to the definition of a decision-making process adopted with respect to the case study and proposing a possible methodological implementation. The synergy between the city and the port area represent an essential component for the sustenance of the economic system of the European Union. In this perspective, ports have been recognized as critical strategic hubs for the transport system and the economic competitiveness and their high potential for job opportunities and investments. However, today, speaking of ports as strategic hubs means considering an increase in spaces dedicated to logistics and consequently of an high impact on cities in economic, social, environmental terms. So it's evident the need to define a new process of circular development of the city port ecosystem, considering environmental and social challenges and proposing a circular urban model capable of renewing the relationship between city and port. And in order to face up to the social, economical, environmental challenges that affect our cities, the Sustainable Development Goals drawn by the United Nations give the operational tools to address the issue of a circular regenerative transformation process and to deduce a set of actions focused on the complex urban and maritime issues affecting the city port ecosystem. The research aims to define an adaptive and multidimensional decision-making process that integrates evaluation approach and tools to deal with complex interaction and conflicts that characterize the city port ecosystem of San Giovanni a Tetuccio district that is our case study. In particular, the methodological approach has been articulated, as you can see in this slide, in three main phases. The problem structure with the collection of data, the reflection on the SDGs, and the definition of a stakeholders map. Then the alternatives definition through the organization of discussion tables and the administration of a survey through the CAT2E method, and the alternatives evaluation through the EVAMIX and NAIADE method. This is our case study, San Giovanni a Tetuccio district, located in the southern Italy. It lies on the east coastal zone of Naples city port. And this area is nowadays squeezed between the administrative boundaries of the two systems of the metropolitan city of Naples and the Central Tyrrhenian Port System Authority. The study and the analysis of the main urban planning tools have made it possible to have a broader and more solid knowledge of the complexities of the urban processes affecting the district. This operation has highlighted how the mending between the coastal strip and the rest of the urban fabric is indispensable and central to the planning of this territory. Another evidence is the quantity of stakeholders that affect this portion of territory, each with their needs, thus highlighting the need to build a collaborative decision-making process capable of finding a compromise between various visions. Here you can see some photos of the case study showing the presence of the railway line, the beach, and also the presence of a lot of factory and obviously also pollution problems. The proposed methodology is based on mixed evaluation methods, analyzing soft and hard knowledge domains, and the collection of hard data deriving from institutional sources was combined with a soft data to bring out the needs and requirements of local communities. And to this end, defining a map of stakeholders and defining a selection of SDGs proved indispensable to orient the research towards a vision of balanced development and make it possible also to assess sustainable compromise solutions. In particular, for the case study, were selected 10 objectives from the SDGs: the quality education, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, and peace, justice, strong instruction, and at the end, partnership for goals. These objectives were translated into project criteria and brought to the attention of the stakeholders during the discussion table. In fact, by organizing thematic tables of discussion, a workflow was built, and each roundtable was organized by submitting to the various participants some SDGs and targets regarding the subject of the meeting. And during the discussion table, each participant was asked to express a score according to the Likert scale from 1 to 5, where 1 represents strongly disagree and 5 strongly agree. The proactive involvement of the main stakeholders ensures the definition of a methodological approach based on a support system for collaborative decisions. The organization of thematic discussion tables makes explicit the relationship between SDGs and the decision-making process of transformation of the study area. Representatives of the local municipal administration, urban regeneration experts, scholars, representatives of local associations, and representatives of the port authorities were involved in the thematic tables held between the spring and the summer of 2020 on the themes of the reuse of existing industrial heritage, the right to the city and the sea, the rearrangement of the road system and water networks of East Naples, and the opportunities of SEZ, so the Special Economic Zone. At the end of each seminar, sustainable goals and visions for the neighborhood are extrapolated to help define project scenarios. In particular, these are the thematic maps resulting from the various scenarios. The former Corradini, that is one of the most important industrial heritage of the area, as Inns between city and port. San Giovanni a Teduccio as Barcelona in its relation with the sea. ZES as Zallo Barcelona, port mobility systems adapted to European standards, and clean water for East Naples. At the same time, a survey was submitted to associations and citizens of the neighborhood to identify better modes regarding new transformation processes to be undertaken. And the survey, constructed according to the cut-to-away method, allows to highlight criticalities and potentialities of a possible transformation process and what are the advantages, disadvantages, and traits of this transformation. The survey shows the need to activate a process of regenerative transformation of the neighborhood's city-port ecosystem that could aim to develop collaborative processes involving stakeholders and local community, and encourage greater physical and functional integration between port and urban spaces. The main criticalities that emerge refer to the lack of direct access to the sea due to an almost total absence of overpasses and underpasses to overcome the physical barrier of the railway line, Another important criticality emerged in the urgency of reclamation works in the coastal area to allow its use for recreational purposes. In addition, there are inadequate housing conditions, the absence of job opportunities, and a poor perception of safety. Instead, the proximity to the sea, the historic city, and the privileged view of the Gulf of Naples were considered as potentialities to be enhanced and from which to start a new and more conscious port city project. These considerations confirm that the dichotomy between the two polarities, the port and the city, has generated isolated and insecure places that urgently need structural and adaptive planning. On the basis of the discussion tables and surveys results, 3 scenarios were defined. Portugal International Lab, that envisaged the expansion of the Levante dock with consequent construction of the TAC bundle without any enhancement of the former Corradini complex. In this scenario, the SEZ area are intended as central retroport areas to make San Giovanni a Teduccio an internationally competitive production hub. The second scenario is the cultural hub that gives voice to the community issue. So the former Corradini, the waterfront, the Pietrarsa Railway Museum, the Apple Academy are configured as the neighborhood new center of cultural and social development. In this proposal, the sets become cultural sets. Then the last one is the community cultural portual hub, that is an equilibrium scenario. And the expansion of the port is limited to the completion of the dock in its current configuration. And this scenario favors a high development of the port towards the SEZ area of the hinterland of East Naples. The neighborhood would have the opportunity to reappropriate of the waterfront, recovering abandoned areas and converting some of the inland SEZs into SEZs with a cultural vocation. The 3 scenarios were assessed through the adoption of 7 criteria divided into further indicators using the software Definite and Deva Mix method, a multi-criteria method to make a decision-making process operational and capable of combining the preferences of the various stakeholders and the data collected. In particular, the criteria relating to the city-port interaction, the enhancement of the existing heritage, and the alteration of the coastline are those to which greater weight has been attributed than the others because of their essentiality for a process of transformation of the San Giovanni Teduccio district. And implementing the Naiade method, a multi-groups method using the Naiade software, a coalition dendrogram was created that highlights the relationship between the proposed scenario and the needs of the territorial stakeholders involved. And the coalition dendrogram also identifies the third scenario as preferable. In particular, the dendrogram underlines how the time component is decisive for defining a compromise scenario capable of responding to the needs of the various stakeholders. So, as I say, both assessment methods highlight the preferability of the third scenario, community cultural portual hub, of which this slide shows the master plan. And this scenario proposes an inclusive and participatory vision capable of explaining the needs of the various stakeholders involved and defining possible mediation solution. This scenario has been explored by proposing a new coastline configuration through the design of a network of public spaces capable of reconnecting the environmental, urban, and social resources that characterize the district of San Giovanni a Teduccio in an ecosystemic vision. So this is the last slide. In conclusion, the adoption of a circular approach make it possible to interpret the complexity of the urban and socioeconomic processes that characterize the city-port ecosystem and trace the drivers capable of activating new scenarios of regenerative transformation. And the structural decision-making process was also helpful to support an accurate reflection on the possibility of a regenerative transformation of a complex context focusing on the specific needs of stakeholder and community. And also, the multi-criteria analysis and the multi-group analysis were an essential tool for the project elaboration, useful for impact assessment and conflicts management. And this is the end. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Does anybody have a question? No. So let's try to return to the second one. Aurora Ballarini, Sergio Copiello, and Edna Donati.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I just need 1 minute to get back my presentation because I need to change the computer. With my one, I was unable to see anything and I wasn't able to hear. So maybe you want to go on with the next one, but I need 1 or 2 minutes to get my presentation.
Okay. Let's try to Ludovica Larocca and Maria Sereta.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, I share my screen. I hope that this works now.
Yeah.
Do you see my screen?
Yes. Okay. Perfect.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone, and thank you so much for the participation to all of you to this great session of MEWE, that is one workshop in ICCSA conference coordinated also with Carmelo Torre. We introduce a topic that we faced with Ludovica Larocca, a PhD student in the Department of Architecture in the University of Naples, Federico II. And the topic is collaborative heritage evaluation, that is the COHIVA approach that we defined for the network strategies enhancement related to the valorization of cultural heritage. We started from some consideration about the condition of religious cultural heritage in Italy and above all in Europe. Considering that in Europe there are many different number of churches that are closed every year, especially in different regions and countries of the European region. Considering England, Denmark are only some examples, but also the Netherlands. At the same time, in Italy, there are many different buildings that are closed and are without any kind of use, or are waiting for a new transformation and new destination that could be useful to activate a new vitality cycle. So in many cases, the state of the church are abandoned, underused, also partially variable or not viable. And the property in many cases are private or are of religious institutions and or communities in some cases. Other particular relevant issue is related to church management that in many cases involve the private or the public sector above all. Starting from this topic, we analyzed the methodological approach and possible tools to consider and to include in order to identify a cultural-led process, able to integrate regeneration according to a cultural perspective, especially starting from the Evans model that consider the cultural-led process as central for the activation of a regeneration and a vitality process for abandoned or underused buildings. And we considered also the strategies of the adaptive reuse as a possible keywords in order to identify a scenario that could have a very short time realization, implementation, able to identify a possible link with a new community and to build generative values able to create new communities. In this, one of more interesting approach was that of Living Lab, because it started with the definition of a perspective of the quadruple helix model for governance and development that include different actors, above all private people and public. In our cases, university, government, business, and citizen. Then the definition of the level of analysis that combine macro, meso, and micro, three different levels that interplay each one with others. Third, the adoption of the characteristics of implementation related to the need of a multi-methodological approach, you are able also to involve and engage the different kind of stakeholders and to operate for a real-life approach. So the phases in our cases are related to the process of a co-evaluation approach, a co-test of the case study, a co-design elaboration of alternative, and co-exploration of the specific knowledge. These phases are a sort of loop able to improve each one the other and to identify a knowledge loop, but also an evaluation loop. In this process, particular relevance are the different tools related to for the eliciting values that consider, as above all, some interpretative or potentially deliberative tools, some deliberative tools, and also some psychometric and deliberative tools. This means also to identify different keywords related to interpretative process and analytical deliberative process, collecting some different tools able to identify values, identify the preferences of the different stakeholders, and synthesize the different preferences in order to select the priorities and support the decision-making process in a collaborative approach. Our case study is related to a very small church that was the key place in Salerno, in the south of Italy, able to identify a reality particularly interesting because it was a church closed in for about 40 years and able to activate a process of living lab in order to open a urban laboratory in the city. This process was implemented in the city of Salerno. It was particularly interesting because the result was that now the church is a community point, able to be not only a driver for the interaction of different links among the communities, but above all to identify a sort of driver point for strategies of revitalization of the different church that are closed in the city. Starting from the experience of the church, the Morticelli Church in Salerno, we extended our methodological process to the different church that characterize the historic center of Salerno. And the co-EVA approach was articulated in three main phases: the knowledge process, the alternative assessment, and the strategy definition. In the knowledge process, we started from the context analysis and elaborated an information matrix. Then in alternative assessment, we implemented a multi-criteria analysis in order to obtain an alternatives ranking. In the third point was the strategy definition that started with a analysis in 2020. So we obtained the two different scenarios. The first scenario that identified the result considering the opportunity of short-term spatial proximity and cultural and social activities that could be activated. And the second scenario that is of long term with the connection and the identification of the different urban connection that were able to implement a synergy among the different buildings to activate. This was able to work on the engagement of the different actors, considering the exploration or co-exploration for the first scenario, and the co-design able to identify the preferable action to implement, involving the different stakeholders. This was also able to identify some small action, able to co-design possible scenarios and implement an opportunity of activation of possible activities. In this also we implemented the second scenario, considering a starting point that was also able to implement the first action that was able to initiate a process considering a sort of pivot process that started with a new action that was a Montevergine Park that considered the reactivation of an abandoned place where was a new starting point for the strategies, able to involve the different kind of actors, and above all to identify an opportunity strategies considering not only the building, the vacant building or closed buildings, but also the not used and vacant spaces. According to this, the strategies was particularly interesting because it could be replicated for the different opportunities of spaces and in order to define a common and synergic strategies. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question? Nope. So let's return to the second presentation of Sergio Copiello. Are you ready?
Yes, sorry again for the delay. Let me try to share the screen. Just a moment. I need to share the whole screen.
Okay.
You see my
Yes.
presentation, I guess.
Yes. Okay.
Just a moment. I need to. Okay. So, good morning, finally. My name is Sergio Copiello. I am an associate professor at the University you have in Venice, and I'm going to present the results of a study I conducted with Aurora Ballarini and Edda Donati. The title of the study is Explicit and Implicit Weighted Schemes in Multi-Criteria Decision Support System. First of all, let me introduce a bit the background of the study, or the underlying framework, if you will, which is given by the cooperation models involving public bodies and private entities, so public-private partnership. This is the framework. Starting from the year 2004, thanks to the publication of the Green Book by the European Commission, we are used to distinguishing between two primary kinds of public-private partnership. On the one hand, we have the institutionalized PPP, which distinctive feature is the establishment of a new company whose capital is brought both by public and private partners. On the other hand, there is the purely contractual PPP, which still involves establishing a new company, but without public shareholders. It is just a special purpose vehicle meant to be awarded a concession. Both kind of public-private partnerships have been used to carry out regeneration projects of the built environment. For instance, in Italy, we have the experience of the so-called urban renewal companies as far as the institutionalized PPP is concerned. Also, we have some cases of concession-based renewal intervention. However, truth be told, there is not plenty of success stories in this field. And that is because urban renewal needs in Italy have led to the rise of different kinds of partnership transactions. There are also similar trends elsewhere in Europe, and they can be subsumed under the category of negotiation-based PPP, or negotiating partnership. This third kind of PPP has its own distinctive features, such as the almost overall private ownership of land to be redeveloped or buildings to be regenerated, as well as the fact that negotiation instead than competition is the ground on which the partnership between public bodies and private entities is built. Another prominent feature lies in the fact that during the negotiation process and the structuring of negotiation-based regeneration programs, it is made extensive use of valuation approaches and methods. For instance, discounted cash flow analysis and derived models, multi-objective linear programming, and especially multi-criteria decision aid techniques and multi-criteria decision support system are usually employed. In our study, the focus is precisely on multi-criteria decision aid techniques, which rank and identify the suitable intervention proposal to be included in the urban regeneration programs. And here it is the research issue we deal with. We aim to investigate the potential occurrence of a gap between the explicit weighting system used in multi-criteria analysis and the implicit weighting system that is actually used. By the expression explicit weighting system, we refer to the weights of the selection criteria identified a priori by the public body that governs the process. Instead, the expression implicit weighting system pertains to the importance of the same criteria that one can infer ex post according to the allocation of funding to the projects included in the urban regeneration program. So I don't want to run late, so I will skip a bit of the case study presentation, just a few words about it. We analyzed the last of a very long series of public-private partnership tools that have been promoted by the Ministry of Sustainable Infrastructure and Mobility. Earlier, it was the Ministry of Public Works, and this last tool goes under the name of National Innovative Housing Quality Program. In particular, we considered the program proposal drafted by the municipality of Treviso in partnership. Obviously, it's a negotiation partnership with other public entities, for instance, the local authority for public housing and social housing, and some other private player. The evaluation of the program proposals submitted to the ministry make use of multi-criteria decision support system, and in this slide you can see the corresponding hierarchical value tree. Essentially, there are 6 classes of criteria. They are environmental impact, social impact, cultural added value, land use improvement, economic viability, and technological advance. Each class of criteria is divided into 5 or 6 sub-criteria, as you can see here. And there is also an explicit weighting scheme for the 6 criteria. For instance, 15% is the relative weight of the criterion focused on environmental impact, 25% is the relative weight for the one referring to social impact, 25% again is the relative weight for economic viability, and so forth. In order to extrapolate also the what we call the implicit weighting scheme, we considered a self-evaluation table showing the correspondence between the local project and the evaluation criteria. A table which was defined by the consultancy and design team. Here you can see an excerpt of it and the three matching levels between project and criteria that are used there. None to low is the first matching level, average or weak matching is the second, high or strong matching is the third and last one. So let's have a quick look at the objective function we used. Essentially, each criterion's implicit weight can be inferred from the allocation of public and private funding to the 20 local projects included in the program proposal, and also considering the matching level between the same criterion and the project. We let the matching level vary, so we try to minimize the difference or the distance, if you will, between the explicit weights, that is to say the observed weights, and the implicit ones, namely the estimated weights. When I say that we let the matching level vary, I also mean that we tested both linear and non-linear functions to define the matching levels between project and criteria. So in the linear function, the first one we tested, you can see here, the first matching level, namely none to low, is equal to 0. Then the second matching level, which is the average one, is equal to 0.5. And lastly, the third matching level, the strong one, is equal to 1. But we try to test also non-linear function, and they are pretty important concerning the results we got. And now turning right to the results, we must say firstly that we got evidence confirming our initial hypothesis that there could be a gap between explicit and implicit weighting schemes. In fact, when comparing the explicit, so the ex-ante weights, and the implicit, the ex-post weights, inferred assuming a linear function of the matching levels, it becomes apparent the distance characterizing weights for some of the criteria. Let me mention, for instance, the first criterion, which you can see here in the left part of the diagram. It is environmental impact, for which the explicit weight, the blue bar here, is 15%, and the implicit one, according to a linear function, the red bar here, is up to 23%. Another fitting example is given by the second criteria, which is social impact. We have an explicit way that is up to 25%, but the implicit one is only 17%. And again, there is similar evidence for the fourth criterion, land use improvement. Again, we have a remarkable distance between the implicit and the implicit weights. They are 15% and 21% respectively. it must be said that when relaxing the constraint that projects match criteria according to a linear relationship, then the gap usually narrows down to a few percentage points. Sometimes it turns out to be negligible, as in the case of the third criterion you see here, which is cultural added value, or again, as in the case of the fifth criterion, financial viability, but in other instances, it is still noticeable. So, what are the implications of our findings? We believe that the gap in the explicit and implicit weighting schemes might tell much about where local priorities lean towards, and especially about the fact that sometimes local priorities are found to differ little or much from the expectations, paying a lot of attention to certain issues while leaving other aspects somewhat in the background. However, this kind of evidence can be biased at least a bit, and the reason why there might be a bit of a bias lies in the fact that projects belonging to different domains are usually characterized by different level of investment cost. On the one hand, upfront costs are likely to be higher for projects matching the criteria of environmental impact and land use improvement, let's say, while on the other hand, the investment costs are likely to turn out lower for the projects meant to meet other criteria such as social impact or cultural added value. Actually, as you can see in this other diagram, when estimating the implicit and the explicit and the implicit weighting scheme, regardless of project cost, we get that the gap between the two schemes reduces. To conclude, essentially what we found is that in the case study, we analyzed the allocation of public investment, and most of all, total investment is in part disproportional in comparison to the weights of the criteria. We believe that all in all, the issue we focus on in this study should not be neglected, even though this seems to be a much underestimated topic in the field of multi-criteria decision support systems. And the reason why we urge to take into consideration this issue is that the weighting scheme is known to exert a huge influence on the ranking of the projects. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Sergio. Does anybody have a question? No. So this section is questions? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
maxibus. Again, my glass is ready. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry for Microsoft microphone. I have to use this one or
What?
just volume.
The volume is
Yes.
here.
Okay.
This is the microphone for you.
And I can put near or is this okay? Okay. Or everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay.
So this means that this is it.
If you want to share this, you need to
Yes.
log in on the
We have-
Jitsi.
Sorry.
If you want to share your screen, you need to enter on the Jitsi
Yes,
web
that
page.
should be the. This is Salve a tutti ragazzi e ragazze. Sono Carmelo Torre, penso che ci conosciamo tutti, giusto?
Buongiorno, professore.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. Ciao Maria Rosaria, ci sei? Ciao ragazzi.
Buongiorno.
Stiamo avendo problemi di... Ciao,
Buongiorno a
ciao.
tutti.
Abbiamo problemi di connessione tra il mio computer e la rete, il monitor. Cioè io vi vedo su Teams, probabilmente mi vedete pure voi, ma io avevo fatto uno schema per, diciamo, per introdurre il programma, cioè con l'elenco degli autori, eccetera. Quindi volevo mostrarlo semplicemente su PowerPoint perché se viene registrato comunque ci saranno persone che potranno assistere senza, diciamo, sapere. Potremmo anche, diciamo, evitarlo, dato che probabilmente la vostra prima slide terrà i nomi, i cognomi e così via. Cioè, io ce li ho, però non li vedete voi. Ora chiedo di nuovo alla collega che mi sta aiutando se è una cosa plausibile da un punto di vista del protocollo. Ok? Voi mi vedete intanto o non mi vedete?
Sì, ti vediamo. Sì.
Sì, lontano ma ti vediamo.
Beh sì.
Stai bene?
Ok, adesso chiedo, potevo ponere una pregunta?
Did the internet is working or not? Not yet. Internet.
Disconnected, está conectado. Intento?
Are you asked for someone help us because you're not connected with the internet?
Okay, but maybe what I can do is just to read and to say and to introduce them. Is it?
Yeah.
Because
they will
as
share
regards
his-
my colleagues, they are ready and they can. Okay.
To share your sound.
Now I can speak and.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So hello to everybody. I'm very happy to see and to hear the voice of my Italian colleagues, but also maybe we can just welcome all those people that will follow the workshop on the net. Okay. And sorry, sometimes technology is produced just to make delay, you know. Okay. Sorry for this delay, and just if you agree with me, I'm just calling one of you just to understand if you are there and you listen and the sound is good and so on, just to understand if everybody of you are well connected, okay? And also after I think that you see something that I don't see, but is the program, okay? Francesco Sica, can...
Yeah, good morning.
Do you have a problem? Are well connected or...
So
is all right?
yeah, it's all right. It's work. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can share my screen.
What about Maria Rosaria? Maria Rosaria is okay for you?
It's okay for me.
Okay, sound is clear? Okay. And Marco Simonetti. Welcome to Marco Simonetti. Hello. Okay. What about the other? Can I contact Ranieri, Rosanna? Is okay for you?
Yes. Good
Okay.
morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Il sound is okay? Is clear?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, I'm happy for this. So I can sing. So I'm just joking. And what about Felicia Di Lido? Felicia? Are you there? Felicia, are you there? Okay.
She left.
Now we have Ranieri, Varini, myself, Sika, and Poli, and maybe Di Lido if I find the list. So, okay, 7 people, more or less. So just because all the participants to the workshop are coming from Italy, as I see. So this means that maybe we should be sometimes, if it's possible, gently to make for people not Italian speaking people understand what we say and what we introduce. Okay, so even if we can speak the same language today, I suggest anyway to try to introduce and speak in English during our workshop. So I ask again, you don't have any problem. All of you are well connected and are ready, is it? Okay. So I can introduce the paper along the list, okay? And you can start the presentation when I invite you, and just stop to speak, okay? Okay, the first paper, the title of the first paper that is going to be introduced is a methodological approach based on the Crochet integral for sustainable evaluation. So, slowly, a methodological approach based on the Crochet integral from sustainable evaluation, okay? The authors are Francesco Tajani, Francesco Sica, Maria Rosaria Guarini, Pierluigi Morano, Rosanna Ranieri. So who is going to introduce the paper?
Myself, Francesco Siga.
Okay. Welcome again, Francesco. You can start to speak.
Okay, so can I start to share my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, do you see?
Yes.
Okay.
All of you are seeing?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so can I start, right? Okay.
You can start. You can start.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Francesco Sica, a postdoc research fellow placed in the University of Trento. The current presentation is entitled A Methodological Approach Based on the Shock Integral for the Sustainable Evaluation. The contribution was made by Professor Francesco Tajani, by myself, Professor Maria Rosaria Guarini, Pierluigi Morano, and the researcher Rosanna Ranieri. The current contribution is named to define optimal and a proper methodology to assess the sustainable project in the urban and territorial context, based on the definition and the construction on the evaluation index that can be made using a specific and proper evaluation method and tools. In particular, we will discuss about the main points that can be characterized, the useful and the often used tools and methods that are used frequently in the evaluation process. And according to the highlights points that we will highlight, then we describe the main step that can be defined according to the theory that characterizes the short integral. These slides show the index of the current presentation. In particular, we will talk about the system of the sustainable accounting. What is the sustainability? Which domains can characterize and define the concept of the sustainability, and how can be declined in the natural and the social economic drivers. We will talk about in briefly term the system of environmental economic accounting and what are the main types of the last one that can be used in order to integrate the concept of the sustainability in the evaluation process that can rule the development of a territory or in specific terms the urban context of the city. Then we will show the research question and work theme, what we are looking for, and the proposal of an economic framework for constructing sustainable indices that can, for a general framework based on the single step that can be related a general theory of the shock integral. In particular, we will discuss about the theoretical framework and the operative workflow under the shock integral. Then we will show a briefly application of the construction about the construction of the sustainable indices regarding a ranking case, a ranking problem between the OECD countries, and then we will talk briefly the conclusion of the current research. So we are in the context of the sustainable accounting in the urban system, and we will talk about the integrated evaluation approach of multi-criteria logic for supporting the impact assessment by transformative initiatives in urban context, trying to take into account the sustainable dimension in order to support and to support the realization and the implementation of initiatives that take into account in itself the sustainable dimension. One of the main aims of the work are the definition of an economic evaluation protocol for integrated assessment of a urban project and supporting choices in urban setting through the economic evaluation method for models for indices construction. In the specific term, we will talk about the importance and the usefulness of constructing indices in order to support in brief time the choices of the best solution in order to be implemented for the sustainable development and the sustainable growth of the urban context or territorial survival. The main goal is supporting the sustainable urban planning and design practices with the proposal of an assessment indices that are realized and constructed according to the main sustainable dimension, and in particular according to the functional relationship between each of them. So we can start to say that the concept of the sustainability can be declined in the dimension of the relationship between the natural resources and the social economic system. According to the main concept that can be read in the Agenda 2030 on the current guidelines by the European Commission about the Biodiversity Strategy 2030 or the new Leipzig chart about the sustainable city, we read and test the importance to take into account in the evaluation process the relationship, the linkages between the importance, the protection of the natural resources, and which are the main drivers that can be related to the importance of protection of natural resources related to the social economic system of a territorial frame. In particular, in the natural resources frame, we define the ecosystem properties and conditions that can be important in order to produce and to supply the ecosystem services potential in order to satisfy specific human needs. According to this relationship between human needs and ecosystem services production, we define and classify the sustainable dimension that can be used as theoretical concept in order to rule and drive the application and implementation of the urban context in the city. The concept, this theoretical concept, is tried to be applied and declined in operative terms. In the May 2021, the United Nations proposed the so-called the system of environmental economic accounting. That's trying to be considered and to suggest to consider in the programming and planning agenda of each country in the world the need to consider the relationship between natural resources and socio-economic drivers. In particular, there are, and we can see different type of framework that are both from national scale to United Nations. The last one is the, I repeat, the system of environmental economic accounting, that it is characterized by different steps, like the first one is the ecosystem access account, the ecosystem condition account, and so on. So there were different attempts that were proposed in order to govern and to control the relationship between urban ecosystem, and the social economic ones. So how the question base, according to this general theoretical and international framework, can be declined and expressed through the follow-up question, like how to assess the sustainability in the connection between natural resources and the social economic driver in the urban economic field. Which are the driving pressures? What are the economic impacts through the urban action? And does the concept of the system of environmental economic country can contribute to international reference framework for supporting the economic assessment urban system to respect of the sustainable pillars? So we try to investigate the current evaluation tools that are often used to support the best choices, the best selection between the different project alternatives in order to reflect what are the limits and the potential, and what can be other instruments, other operative way that can be support the proper selection between different project alternatives that can take into account the relationship between each sustainable dimension in accordance to the need to consider and to reflect about the relationship between natural resources, social system, and the economic system. What are we aiming for? So the proposal, the main goals of the current presentation, the current research is to propose an economic evaluation framework impact-based for urban renewal action sustainable footprint, and promoting assessment tools fast track for testing the sustainable feasibility of the urban action. So, in general, according to the system of environmental economic accounting and the operative framework that had characterized one of the main proposals and main attempts to rule the relationship between urban ecosystem and the social economic ones, we have proposed a general framework based on the multi-criteria logics that can be based on the definition of the main goals that we can use. We must define at the first step. The second one is the choice of the main indicators that can be expressed to attempt the achievement of each goals, and then how to consider and how to put in a unique framework, in a unique tool, the main goals to be achieved and the indicators that can be expressed, the achievement of each goals. So the need to use and to construct evaluation models that can be based on the definition of different tools and evaluation methods. In particular, we will focus on the evaluation models, defining and classifying the evaluation hardware and evaluation analytic model. In particular, the operator that can be can use immediately in the fast track way the evaluation hardware that, in particular, for fast track for problem solving, in order to resolve immediately a specific evaluation problem. But in the same way, there is the possibility to implement evaluation analytic model that can be the possibility to adapt the model to the real case to be solved, to be ruled, and to construct a network building transdisciplinary science, and to establish a feasible business model. And in order, the use of evaluation analytical model gives the possibility to promote capacity building and co-learning processes. In particular, according to the main often used evaluation tools and methods, we define the different capacity between each of them to consider the data input and how this data can be related and aggregated between them. In particular, we can see, for example, the goal programming that can be gives as output the possible optimal solution with deviation from the ideal solution, and how the evaluation, as example of the evaluation hardware, we can see and we can try to use, for example, the AMPL, a mathematical programming language, the TOPSI software plugin, and so on. So there are many evaluation hardware and many evaluation analytical models that are often used to implement evaluation, to resolve evaluation problem, and to implement specific algorithms that put in them the indicators that express the sustainable goals, and the difference between each of them can be seen in the different degree of the interaction between indicators and the different capacity to aggregate them in order to give set outcome in general indicators that express the feasibility, for example, of a general project for the sustainable development of a territory. So we, after the discussion and after a simple literature review about the main potential limits of each of these instruments, we then reflect how can summarize each potential, its limits, in order to resolve the main criticisms that can characterize each of them. And so we find in the shock integral the capacity to define and to obtain as outcomes a possible and useful indicators that can be used and implemented in order to express the sustainable performance of a territorial scale or a general project can be implemented for the sustainable growth of a territory. The shock integral in general is characterized by the following steps. The first one is the identification capacity. So the eliciting representative capacity that reflects the importance of each evaluation criteria and even of each element to be to achieve a specific sustainable goal. The second one is to regard the problem of the weight process. So, according to the main literature review that we made, investigating the potential and the limits on the different evaluation tools, we see that one of main focus problem is can be related to the weighting process. So, according to the shock integral, we see that this problem can be overlapped using a Shapley function that is used often in the game theory. And so we found that this Shapley function can be a startup point to reflect how to go up to this problem in a rational manner. The second step, the third step, is a t-test of interdependencies that is based on the calculation of the relative importance index, the ordering index, and the interaction index, and then the calculation of the final index. So we try to apply the shock integral test to a ranking case between OECD countries. So for the first step, we identify the study set size and relative sustainable indicators. Then we jump to the measurement of weights, then the quantification of the shock measure and the comparison with the main methods that can be found in the theoretical-based framework of the main often used tools in the evaluation process. So the geometric mean and the arithmetic mean. So in order to test the feasibility of the shock integral, so we studied the 24 European countries that we can find in the OECD list. In particular, for each country, we select briefly a short set of indicators, but we can add some ones in order to ampliate and to grow the indicator set of consideration. We can, in the first step of our research, we consider the social connection, the real GDP per capita, and the media surface of accessible green urban area. The third one, according to these three indicators, so then we jump to the measured weights, according to the Shepler function that we can see in the current slide. For each step, for each indicator, and according to the relationship between each one in the set of 2 or 3 elements, we define the weights of each indicator, and the weights that can be related to the set where we had the 2 or 3 indicator. In this way, we jump the problem to consider how to rule the relationship between the single indicator with the other one. Then we realized we calculate the weight in different type of combination, where we consider only the first one, the first indicator, and so on. And the second frame were based on the consideration on the 3 indicator, and so on. We create different sensitivity scenario where each one is characterized by the consideration of 1 indicator, and so on. Then we calculate the shock integral about using the current formula that is a general mathematical expression that can be derived by the theoretical framework, mathematical framework of the shock integral theory. In particular, for each country, we calculate, we summarize the indicator value and the index assessment in each sensitivity analysis, and then we calculate the medium of the value that we have obtained in correspondence of each scenario. As last step, we try to compare the evaluation score obtained after the shock integral implementation with that one obtained with the current and often used analytic and operative way, the geometric mean and arithmetic mean. We can see that the geometric and arithmetic mean gives as outcome numerical value that in many of the country are equal, like in that one that we can obtain it with the application and implementation of the shock integral. So in the conclusion, we can say that the shock integral can be seen as a flexible method to support the definition of evaluation indices in order to support the selection of the proper solution to support the sustainable growth of the territorial scale based according to the interdependencies between each indicators that reflect one of the main sustainable dimension. And the shock methodology allows the preferences of policymaker and the public entities, reflecting and giving the possibility to reflect according to a scientific evidence based on the relationship, the linkages between each sustainable dimension. And the further insights regard the analysis of the interaction through involvement of experts elicitations for the urban scale of context of reference, and the inclusion of more performance indicator that can be related also with to the specific urban project to be used and to be implemented for the urban sustainability growth of the city. So it's all for me, and thanks for your attention.
Many thanks. I think that the topic is interesting, and I invite my colleagues to, if you have some question, just pose. I have maybe one or two questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So 20 years ago, most of my friends called me the man of indicators because I made my part of my PhD about indicators. In that period, there was an experiment. Do you hear me? Sorry, all of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There was an experiment that is quite famous. The name of the experiment is Sustainable Seattle. And this kind of experiment was based on a progressive selection of indicators by interview. So for in hierarchic selection, step by step, they reach the last one, so the most preferred. Okay, so in the first stage, a part of these data were recorded. In the second stage, there was this pyramid to get to the last one. But well, the main indicator was the presence of salmon in the river. So this means that maybe the presence of salmon in the river, just or the presence of biological presence, okay, and different animal species and so on. In the monitoring is continuous because there are some biologists and a lot of technical technician and researcher that looks nature and interplay between nature and the artificial world. Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, how to, for instance, start from a base of indicator and how to select, maybe with some interview to expert and so on. And after, maybe we can ask again, Clocher method could be, how to say, something that make a check of statistic, okay? But is also remember that environmental democracy is the password of sustainable analysis and development, okay? For instance, your paper or any paper that is speaking about sustainability is a peak inside the sustainable development, okay? Because it's knowledge.
Yeah.
So there are some variable. Knowledge is not easy to model. Okay, it's not a variable that is easy to apply in. Maybe we don't have the characteristic to apply a model sometimes. Okay.
Exactly.
Just for this, I remember the salmon. Okay, because maybe somebody can say, okay, it's very good to eat salmon, but not when you are polluted water. Okay. I mean that could be very, very interesting to across the approach. On one side, you are trying to understand the robustness of an approach that can be put in a lot of occasions, can be used in a lot of occasions. And on the other side, we should study the last 20 years of investigation about the behavior of citizen and in some way the not clear but the recognition of the importance of a wood or a fish, something like that, because also this is discriminating. There is a discrimination in people. Obviously, if we use statistic, discriminant became a statistical concept, okay, and this can be communicated. The last one is this. Usually, sustainability has a temporal segment of 20 years, 10 years, and so on.
Yeah.
If we use the statistics, maybe we can also try to choose or to reason about the interval of time that make trustable the variable according to the change of society customs. Sorry, I was too long, but today I'm really difficult to speak and to explain very few. Okay,
No, it was
but
very clear.
you can say I will not introduce my presentation, and I give time to the other for explain for 2 or 3 minutes more. Okay,
Okay.
this is what I decide. Okay, can you say something about an answer
Yeah.
or okay?
Yeah, briefly.
Okay.
So I think that we can adopt two approach: one top down, and bottom up. So if you can see the problem according to a point of view in a top down focus, so the selection of indicators are can be made less of the consideration of the preferences by the citizens. Otherwise, we can adopt, if you can adopt the bottom-up approach, we must need the preferences of the people about the specific needs that reflect the specific needs to be solved. And then we can then select the proper indicators that reflect and show the current state of the territory. Yeah. In this frame, according to my idea, is to find equilibrium between the political programming and what are the needs of the people that we can express using specific indicators. And I think that the problem, the focus, the current, the criticism is that to find optimal equilibrium between political programming and urban needs. And the selection, if we can adopt the bottom-up approach, it is possible to make using a survey or so on. But I agree with you, in order to reflect on the time frame that in which the sustainability is growing, in order to reflect and to define the main indicators that can be implemented to show and to read the growing of the countries, the European countries, and so on, because this is another question. So the sustainability, in which territorial frame we can relate this one, because if we can focus on the European countries, so for each territorial frame, we can adopt and implement a trend scenario analysis to individualize the main and the proper indicators. And for our research and attempts to test the strength of this approach, this consideration will regard the next step of our research. So how to integrate the weights that we can define and evaluate after the evaluation and the participatory process in this general framework based on the weight calculation in the statistic terms. So in general, I think that, but I completely agree with you about the need to read the sustainability in a specific time frame range in order to start by a specific and content set of indicators. So this is one. It's all.
Many thanks. I agree with you. Just I think that the future can be helpful for us anyway, because just we can monitor with the models the state of every 10 years, 20 years that are reliable with the time of environmental changes. Okay.
Yeah.
So sustainability is not fighting against model, or model are not fighting against sustainability. Okay, it just, for instance, the discussion can suggest to my mind what you said. Suggests to my mind, for instance, that obviously it's possible to have a periodical analysis, and you can apply a statistical method just to and in this case, there is no conflict. It makes no sense to have a conflict about sustainability evaluation or statistical and so on, because what we need is to understand our future. So maybe a progressive monitoring and can be really helpful, just to make a prediction of the future. So we cannot do this prediction if we don't have number analysis and so on. And the same, we cannot have a good policy if we don't check in parallel the state of the nature or the state of social and environmental economics and so on. Okay. Yeah. There is some question more or some consideration? I think this the Francesco Sica was really effective in the discussion, very clear. But maybe we can, if you have some other topic that can be considered, or if not, we can go on. Okay. Can I go on?
Thank you.
Okay. The second one is the authors are Maria Elisa Botte, Maria Cerreta, Pasquale De Toro, Eugenio Muccio, Francesca Nocca e Giuliano Poli. The speaker should be Giuliano Poli, if I remember.
Yes.
Giuliano, you can start with your presentation. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. I try to change my screen. Can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Carmelo, for his introduction. This is a work titled Cost-Benefit Analysis for the Industrial Heritage Reuse. And here we present the case of ex-Corradini factory in Naples. The research team is compounded by Maria Sabotte, Maria Cerreta, Pasquale De Toro, Eugenio Muccio, Francesca Nocca, Sabrina Sacco, and me. And it is a work coordinated by Pasquale De Toro and Maria Cerreta within a project of National Plan of Recovery and Resilience that is in Italy plan that found the main important project to develop some areas of Italy. And this is the outline of our presentation. We first present the theoretical background linked to the CBA analysis, cost-benefit analysis. Then we propose our methodological approach applied to a case study of ex-Corradini factory in Naples. And then we show the summary of results, first our first results, and then discussion and conclusion of presentation. The cost-benefit analysis is a tool, analytical, for judging the economic advantages or disadvantages of an investment. And it is used to guide the decision-making process, estimating the monetary cost of a project and the benefit to society. The workflow on the left is related to the workflow we followed to evaluate, to make active the process of CBA, in which the preliminary phase is a check of consistencies of the tool, if it is necessary to use this tool or change to another type of tools of analysis. And if the results of methodology if the methodology is consistent with some points of the project and the results are reliable, we can go through the process and perform the assessment of the study area using performance indicators. If the results are unreliable. Sorry, we have to we need to check the assumption and consistency of the analysis and return to the first step. But if the results are reliable, we can perform the assessment of indicators to be used to analyze the context of the project. And if the first check we had to make in order to proceed with the workflow is check the possibility of funding of the project, and this condition is respected only if the net present value, the financial net present values, is lower than zero. So if the financial the project is the net present values is lower than zero, we can say that the project is in need of co-financing, and we can have the contribution of European community to justify our intervention. And but another condition that has to be respected is that the economic net present values, that is the mirror of financial net present values, had to be measured of zero in order to have the financial the funding. The most important things that are linked to CBA refers to the concept of opportunity cost that is linked to the evaluation of best fit alternatives among a suite of mutually exclusive alternatives that is had to respect some social criteria, have to respect some social criteria, some have to respect some benefit in terms of social criteria, and the C is of the analysis have to respect a long-term perspective. So all the indicators we selected during this process had to be an horizon time of till 10 years as a minimum in order to verify and check the positive or negative impact of the project. And another characteristics is the microeconomic approach that the CBA use, and also the incremental approach that is made by several phases in order to reach the results, the final results. First of all, we made a scientometric analysis in order to verify the most important authors that publish articles related to CBA. And we found that almost 60,000 open access publications mentioning the CBA in the Scopus database. But there is a gap of research linked to the application of CBA in the case of industrial reuse project. And we try to bridge this gap with this study, with this application, proposing the application of this methodology to a project of industrial heritage reuse. But the main interesting fields of this research are linked to these 5 categories that are environment, transportation, fringe areas, and port areas. And these authors presented in the Scopus database used this application with different purposes and goals according to the field of expertise. As an example, in the environmental studies, the most important, the most frequent study used the benefit transfer method to estimate the cost derived from biodiversity loss and degradation of ecosystem services. So they use the cost-benefit analysis to estimate the economic cost of this loss. But also in other field of expertise, like the fringe areas and the peripheral, the study linked to peripheral areas, the most important application of CBA are linked to measure the city sprinkling and the land consumption. But our goal is to try to bridge this gap of research in the research, applying the CBA to a case of industrial heritage reuse. This is the methodological approach we use. After the literature review that identify these five main field of research, we continue with the testing phase in which we set the most important characteristic of the context, the link of this context with the most important SDGs, and the function that the project had to be pursued in order to guarantee the sustainability of this area. In order to select the best suite alternatives, we use a method, a multi-criteria method, that is that belong to the software EvaMix, that is the regime analysis, in order to select the most important function to be pursued for the project of industrial reuse. The third phase of the methodology is linked to the indicator sampling, in which we have to select the most important indicators to pursue the demand analysis, and also select the criteria that best represent the main characteristics of the intervention areas. The results are linked to the results of CBA, in which the financial analysis, in particular the net present values, has been estimated to be lower than zero in order to have the European funding. And if this condition is respected, as in the case of our study, the economic analysis has to be performed in order to verify which are the most important externalities, positive and negatives, linked to the project, and also an evaluation of uncertainty linked to these externalities have to be performed with the risk analysis. Finally, we use this application also to bridge this research gap in order to identify which are the most important gap in the methodology and which are the most important pros and cons linked to this approach. But this is our case studies. We are in Campania region, and in particular, the impact of this project of industrial building reuse have positive and negative externalities in a more extended area. In particular, we estimate the negative and positive externalities of this project to an area that is linked to the Campania region, but also we consider also all other impact that this project could have on Italy in general. This is our study area that is in the neighborhood, in the eastern neighborhood of Naples City. In particular, this neighborhood is named San Giovanni a Teduccio district. And as you can see from this image, it's a very dense urban tissue with most populated, which is most populated. And in the central part of the figure, there is the intervention area that is ex-Corradini factory, that is an abandoned industrial plant, which which was subject to a process of deindustrialization. So we propose the project goals that are at the basis of the CBA cost-benefit analysis are linked to an implementation of this cluster district, of a cluster district that promotes new economies and opportunities for social interaction, consumption, and information and knowledge exchange. Another goal is providing highly knowledge-intensive structures in a context that is marginalized and which most populated, most part of population is have a low income or is have no income. So, a project of innovation and in particular technological improvement can be a great impact on new job opportunities in order to reduce this criticality. Another project goal is promoting a process of social center in the urban regeneration, in which all the dimensions of well-being and social equity can be promoted in a form that is integrated with the cultural heritage reuse and strategies of valorization. The main drivers of the project are linked to the energy conversion, since, as you can see on the right side of this image, of this figure, this blue plant is at Tirrenia Power, that is a central carbon central of energy that have a great impact on the district. One of the drivers of this project is to try to reduce this impact of energy, non-sustainable energy production from this central. And in order to have a more models that is more circular and in line with the circular economy principle, in particular with bioeconomy principle, this project is linked to one of the most important SDGs for this area. But in particular, these are the most important functions that can be localized inside this reuse project, in the Corradini reuse project, that aims to, allows Corradini to be the first demonstrator of a shared facility for the circular bioeconomy, in order to have experimental center infrastructure for biofoundry, other experimental infrastructure linked to the research, and in particular to the research make a reduction of fossil combustion and hydrocarbon with the new technology of hydrogen. Also, other function in this study area, in the Corradini area, are critical materials technology platform with the strategic raw materials and the cloud infrastructure. So that are all linked to an innovation project. The phase of selection of alternatives, as Abbo mentioned, was performed with regime methods, in which we select 8 criteria to select the best suite alternative among the set of 4 alternatives, and we performed the regime analysis to set the best alternatives in terms of functional sizing, and we repeat the process to obtain the best suite alternative for the best suite technological system to be selected. After the selection of best suite alternative, we had to select the most important indicator for the demand analysis. We divided these indicators according to the most important beneficiaries of the project functions. In particular, the most important beneficiaries are businesses, researchers, young professionals and students, and target population and general public. We use this set of indicators to represent the most important dynamic linked to these 3 main categories of actors that could be interested in the development of the Corradini factory. First, we make an extraction of data after defining the externalities represented by these proxy indicators, and we estimate the most probable data, most likely data linked to these indicators. And the final results of our cost-benefit analysis was estimated in the first part, the financial analysis that allows us to estimate the net present values as a very low respect to the zero value, since it reached minus 6 million euros with the internal rate of return of 1%. So we need to perform an economic analysis in order to estimate the positive externality of this project. And we reach an economic net present value very high with 16 million euro with an internal rate of return of 20%. The qualitative risk analysis allows us to estimate the quality of indicators we use for the CBA assessment, and we select these indicators in terms of cost, revenues that are the results of financial analysis. And we use other externalities that are linked to cost avoided in terms of carbon dioxide, the benefit for business startup, the real estates, how changed the real estate values market after the project of requalification, the benefit in terms of training and human capital, and the technological risk. The risk assessment is required when we have to deal with uncertainty that permeates this investment process project. And these are the main results we obtain with the qualitative risk analysis. As you can see, the results are linked to the to provide a mitigation measures when the function, the action are not very feasible for the study area, and what is a risk, high risk that these indicators are not able to represent this dynamic. And we select these indicators in terms of probability to be of risk that the letter A represents the lower risk, while the letter D, that is the most high letter of this alphabet, represent the most important risk. And also we select the variables according to the severity in terms of impact on the society and on the context. And after performing the qualitative analysis, we can conclude that saying that these studies aim to show an application of the cost-benefit analysis method in the case of industrial heritage reuse through innovation and research functions. The most important potential linked to the application of these methodologies are linked to the elicitation of the social values of the project in monetary terms, but also the possibility to manage conflicts that are related to the choice of best fit scenarios through the multi-criteria methods. In particular, we use EVAMIX, but also other multi-criteria applications can be used to solve this task. Also, another potential is the implementation of the risk analysis in order to afford the uncertainty linked to the variable to be selected, and also the consideration of multidimensional impact in the choice for a better, for a suitable decision-making process. The limitations are very critical and are linked to the data downscaling, since the most important indicators and variables to be selected for a CBA are linked to a data-driven knowledge and data-driven model. So we select these indicators from data, but also from literature and also other sources of information. When we scale this information in a small district, we can have some difficulties linked to the statistical procedure to be used in order to avoid outlier and other strange results. And another limitation is linked to the time consuming, linked to the data collection procedures, and also by the fact that this is not very friendly, user-friendly tools for non-technicians. So the technician have to manage this all the process, and have to be able to communicate the results to the decision maker. And also a follow-up to this research is linked to a knowledge transfer of skills and techniques to be implemented for both CBA investment project and methodology expansion to larger areas in order to have a more inclusive scenario, and consider also the impact that are more large and go outside the study area of analysis. Thank you for your attention.
Well, very, very complex presentation, because there are many links between a lot of concepts, and this invite to go on with the research, but also to understand if there are some fields that are more important than the other. And I thank Giuliano Poli for this presentation. And I just wanted some small aspect. You are speaking about a consolidated experience, okay?
Yeah.
And can you try to imagine the future in next 10 years, and how and which way the application of multidimensional evaluation can be modified or unapplied or expanded? So what is the scenario again in the future, and also what is the possibility to that like in each era discard some method and invite to understand a new method that is not oppressive but just like a future evolution? Because when I was young, I think since in the last 30 years, we provided more or less 20, 25 methodology for multi-criteria assessment.
Yeah.
So one per year, more or less. So this could be interesting. Do you have some opinion about?
Yes. Thank you for these questions.
Just like it was quite spontaneous when you read the last part, the conclusion, you know? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to respond, answer to your questions. That is very interesting. I think that one limitation of this CDA approach is linked to the fact that not all the components of the study area of a context can be explained with the monetary variables. So this is a great limitation that can allow us to other different methods, experimenting different methods to manage this complex context, also using non-economic variables, non-monetary variables. In particular, I think that in future there is a great interest of researchers in there will be a great interest.
Sorry, I have to stop you because Osvaldo obviously remember me that we have a plenary session now. So as I said, I didn't not introduce my presentation, but I think that is time for the last one. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So the last one is Paola Perchinunno, Antonella Massari, Samuela Labate, e Lucia Mongelli. The title of the paper is a Special Statistical Model for the Analysis of Poverty in Italy According to Sustainable Development.
Yes. Good morning.
This man doesn't look like Paola Perchinunno. Okay.
Sure not.
Okay.
Sure not. I'm presenting the paper for them because they are all in universities activities, so I'm just presenting for them the paper. And this is a work that is related to the capacity of our Sustainable Development Goals indicators to represent and to monitor the efficiency of the huge amount of money that the European Union Recovery Plan has given to Italy, also to rebalance, in some sense, territorial disparities. So this work is trying to understand if effectively this kind of tools, financial tools, are giving to Italy the possibilities also to rebalance these territorial disparities. So I will share the presentation. Do you see the presentation? Carmelo?
Yes, we can see.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yes.
So the paper has been written by Paola Pertinuno, Antonella Massari, and Samuele Alabate from the University of Bari Department of Economics. And it starts from the consideration that the first one of the Sustainable Development Goals, which indicate normally changes that nations and people of the world are committed to achieve, is related to ending poverty in all its manifestations, including its most extreme forms, through interconnected strategies. This is the subject of the goal, the Sustainable Development Goal number 1. So the objective of this work is a statistical analysis of the indicators useful for achieving this objective of the goal number 1 through multidimensional statistical analysis methodologies. In this case, it has been used total, fuzzy, and relative to understand which Italian regions need more government intervention. So what are the disparities that already exist in Italy, and if in this way the European Union recovery plan is acting also to rebalance these disparities. Probably, as you know, all the national statistical institutes have been called by the United Nations Statistical Commission to play an active role in their national coordination to produce indicators for measure the sustainable development and to monitor its objectives. They have defined, as you know, all over the world, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets related to them, which they try to evaluate 3 dimensions of the sustainable development. The goal number 1, no poverty, has a very ambitious goal to end all forms of poverty by 2030. The statistical measures that populate these objectives are 21, and they use 11 indicators that they have divided into 3 sets of indicators. Indicators of economic poverty, indicators related to the lack of basic services that are natural, really important for every one of us to live in a territory, indicators related to the lack of housing services. All the data are available in Italy at 2019, and in this year we see that, for example, the 20.1% of people living in Italy are at risk of poverty, and the 7.4% in conditions of severe material deprivation, and 10% in low work intensive families. So also in countries of the West world, we have a significant level today of poverty. But in Italy, we have a very strong territorial disparities, because at the level of territorial distribution of these indicators, we can see that there is a clear difference between the northern area and the south and the islands. Normally, the northern areas are at low level of risk of poverty, such as, for example, the Northeast has a 13.2% of population exposed to the risk of poverty. On the contrary, the islands, they have the 43.6% of population exposed to the risk of poverty and social exclusion. So these disparities are present also in the set of the indicators related to the lack of basic services. And here we have a more balanced distribution in the territories in this kind of set of indicators. Regarding housing services, we can say that at the national level, 8.7% of households in 2019 had an overload of the cost of housing, 8.6% irregularities in water distribution, and 6.5% discontinuity of the electricity services. That is one of the base services that we need to live in a place. And the percentage of households without a fixed and or a mobile broadband connection, that is the base of our contemporary living, is much higher. And in this case, also in this case, as in the first one that we have seen, there's a great difference between the south and the islands and the north Italian regions. So, to analyze all these indicators in an integrated way, the research group has used the total fuzzy and relative approach that consists in a definition of the measurement of a degree of membership of an individual to the fuzzy totality of the difficulty condition in a range that goes from 0 to 1, as in the Lofty-Zade method. From a mathematical point of view, such a method consists of the construction of a function of membership to the fuzzy totality of difficulty. And the function is useful to subdivide in clusters of difficulty that indicates a distribution rule for urban difficulty inside different urban realities, and we can say territorial realities. The mathematical form of this function is expressed in this formula, and we use also to weight different indicators based on the different territorial conditions. So once the set of indicators were identified, the minimum, the maximum, and the average values for each indicator of the different sets were detected, and the weight have been also defined so that everyone can understand what the research group has put in more weight compared to the others. So, for example, the maximum weight they've given to the low work intensity and severe material deprivation, and the low weight has been given to the families who declare difficulties connecting with public transport. As a result of the application, the research group have classified the Italian regions based on these fuzzy values, that is, synthetic values, obtaining the classification that you can see in this table, and that recall the high values and the difference between regional situations of poverty. So that high values means high situation of poverty, low values are significant of absence or low level of difficulties. And the same has been applied to regions with a high shortage of basic services, with and obtaining the same distribution and results that then have been applied through a GIS at the national level, representing them on a map of the Italian regions, and representing the distribution of these synthetic, total fuzzy, and relative indicator. For example, regarding the set of indicators related to economic poverty, we can see that individuals with severe difficulties live mainly in the southern region, and especially in Sicily and Campania, and then to Apulia, followed by Molise, Calabria, and Sardinia. So the south and the islands regions. On the high level, or we can say the low level of poverty, we have all the northern and especially the northeast regions of Italy. Regarding the second set of indicators that they have expressed, such as lack of basic services, we can see that the situation is more distributed. Also because, for example, we see also the presence in the lack of basic services more affected regions, probably because there's a high value of the indicator related to families who had to give up health services. So the Aosta region suffered by this high level of this index. But the situation is more distributed, also because we see that central region and southern regions are more similar. So the differences here are more related to the northeast regions and the others, apart from Campania that shows high level of basic services. About the third set of indicators, we related to lack of services for housing. We observe that there are two regions that have real difficulties, and they are south and island, central regions such as Abruzzo and Lazio, but also some northwest regions such as Liguria, for example. So also here, the distribution is more.
Sorry, sorry, it's not. Pardon me, but we have more or less a few seconds because of the next plenary.
Okay. I go to the conclusion.
Sorry.
Conclusion. No. I saw the work at the end put in evidence that there's a different starting point between Italian regions, which appear more linked to more articulated regional differences, that the next generation European Union, if it isn't more related to have the risk to exalt, to exacerbate, to put more in evidence these differences, more than balance them. So we need to review, in our opinion, the way we are using this huge amount of money to rebalance also the situation between different regions in Italy. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. I don't know if you have some question. If there is no question, I say, okay, our session is lasted now. Okay?
Perfect.
Thanks to be patient also, and have a nice follow-up now. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
course. So,
but it's only I think that,
but I don't know where is the keynote.
yes, but keynote.
The keynote is Frank